The Terai region of eastern Nepal is largely agrarian, and life here is heavily anchored to the Kankai River basin. But for daily drinking water, most of these households don't rely directly on the river. Over 2/3 of the local population depends on decentralized, shallow tube wells pumped by hand right in their own yards. The ground beneath this region is composed of Holocene alluvial deposits. These are highly permeable aquifers. Because the soil is porous and sandy, agricultural runoff and unmanaged wastewater from the surface can rapidly infiltrate the shallow water table below. Across Nepal, over 90% of the population has access to basic water supply services, yet the percentage of water that is safely managed is actually declining, driven by rapid urbanization and agricultural expansion. Physical access to a water source has outpaced the assurance of its safety. Residents can easily draw water, but they are increasingly exposed to a hidden crisis pooling just beneath the surface. This table breaks down household perceptions of water pollution. Over 96% correctly identify that polluted water transmits disease. Yet 0% have ever attended a local awareness program, and only a quarter have actually tested their water quality. Without access to laboratory testing, families rely entirely on a sensory heuristic. They judge whether water is safe based strictly on how it looks, how it smells, and how it tastes. Relying on the senses is a dangerous metric for water safety. Perfectly clear groundwater can carry elevated levels of arsenic or invisible pathogens from nearby septic seepage, while visibly turbid, cloudy water might actually be biologically safe to consume. Understanding that water carries disease offers no protection if your only diagnostic tools are your eyes and your tongue. To cope with questionable water quality, many households turn to point-of-use filtration. Roughly 69% of homes have adopted some form of domestic filter, like these multi-tiered ceramic systems. But adoption doesn't equal success. Among those who resist using them, nearly half inherently distrust the filter's efficacy, and a third abandon them because they clog too rapidly. The local groundwater naturally contains high levels of iron and sediment. When pumped to the surface, this iron oxidizes, turning the water a reddish-brown color that chokes standard filtration systems much faster than the manufacturers intend. Families purchase these filters, but receive zero localized training on how to clean or maintain them against this specific mineral buildup. Frustrated by the constant clogging, they often stop using them entirely. Delivering a piece of hardware without operational education turns a life-saving tool into an expensive, discarded trap. This chart illustrates the primary household water storage practices in the area. Economic constraints drive these choices. 43% of families rely on traditional earthen pots, followed closely by plastic bottles and buckets. These traditional clay pots are cheap and keep water cool, but their porous interior surfaces make them notoriously difficult to thoroughly clean and sanitize. The situation is compounded by how the water is accessed. Most households fail to use separate dipping utensils for drinking, relying instead on shared cups or hands. Every time an unwashed hand reaches into an open-lid storage container, it introduces aggressive secondary bacterial contamination to a supply that may have been clean when it left the pump. Even if a household manages to draw perfectly clean groundwater, unsafe domestic storage habits rewrite the risk equation right inside the kitchen. When you multiply these environmental hazards by poor storage practices and low income, you find that 75% of surveyed households are operating in a state of high behavioral vulnerability to water pollution. This graph maps the resulting physical outcomes. Diarrhea is the most severe and prevalent health impact reported, afflicting over 35% of households in the region. Looking at the age distribution data here, we can see exactly who bears this burden. The physical toll falls heavily on the most immunologically vulnerable demographics, children under 12 and the elderly over 60. These outcomes trace directly back to economics. Statistical models show that lower-income families are significantly more likely to experience severe post-storage water discoloration due to their reliance on cheaper, open-lid containers. This water crisis does not threaten everyone equally. It specifically targets the lowest income and biologically weakest members of the community. To address this, the current model of passive reliance on national authorities must shift toward hyperlocal, community-managed water systems. The first necessary intervention is establishing low-cost water testing centers at the local municipal ward level. Families need objective chemical data so they can stop relying on their eyes and noses to judge water safety. Second, local governments must subsidize high-quality, closed-lid storage containers. This cuts off the primary breeding ground for secondary bacterial contamination inside the home. Finally, this effort requires engaging female community health volunteers. Because women manage household water, they need direct, gender-inclusive training on hygiene and filter maintenance to keep these systems running. Ultimately, achieving Sustainable Development Goal 6 depends on equipping communities with the specific knowledge and localized tools required to govern their own survival.